Hi, I'm Femi Okay.
And I'm Malika Bilal, and you're in the stream.
Today, Sudan's revolution reaches a turning point. After a deadly crackdown on demonstrators, is there still a chance for a civilian government? Or is military rule here to stay?
Let us know what you think about the political crisis in Sudan. Share your thoughts via Twitter or in our live YouTube chat.
I am Ismail Kushkush. I'm a journalist, and you are in the stream.
We will not allow chaos. We will not allow chaos, and we will not go back on our convictions. There is no way back. We must impose the respect of the country by law.
That was Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo, deputy head of Sudan's Transitional Military Council, on June the 5th. On Sunday, Sudan's military rulers said that they will be boosting the presence of armed forces in the country. The announcement came after the start of a general strike and civil disobedience campaign by protesters. Among Sudan's armed groups are the Rapid Support Forces, a paramilitary unit demonstrators blame for last week's deadly crackdown, in which the opposition says more than 100 people were killed. The Health Ministry put the death toll at 61. Protest leaders on Tuesday called off the general strike and have agreed to resume talks with the Transitional Military Council.
Anti-government rallies that began last December eventually led to a military coup, ousting Sudan's longtime leader, Omar al-Bashir, in April. So what lies ahead for the popular uprising? With us to discuss this in Austin, Texas, Hussam Osman Mahjoub, spokesperson for the Sudanese Engineers Syndicate. On the phone in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, Al-Jazeera reporter Hiba Morgan. In Khartoum, Mohamed Amin, he is the spokesperson for the group Sudan Change Now. And in Khartoum is Ahmed Mahmoud, an activist.
It's good to see you, everybody. I'm sorry under such awful circumstances, but Hussam, we were just hearing, you were watching Al Jazeera, I'm watching Al Jazeera, we're following the news about the civil disobedience strike being suspended. When did you hear about that? And then what was your immediate reaction?
Thank you very much, Femi and Malika, for having me. I heard about it when it was officially announced. So rumors about it and discussions actually about it were going on for the past few days since the announcement of the civil disobedience. But the official announcement came, as you said, about an hour and a half ago. The immediate reactions were mixed. Protesters, many of the protesters are still feeling actually and expressing their feelings that this civil disobedience should have continued. My personal feeling is this was one of the necessary steps, one of the peaceful tools and means the Sudanese Professional Association, SPA, and the Forces of Declaration for Change and for Freedom and Change used since the beginning of these demonstrations and this revolution back in December 2018. So this was one of these tools. It has played a significant role in displaying to the Sudanese people at the beginning. I mean, for initially, and for the everyone who is observing the other regional international players, that the Sudanese people can resist, can up their resistance when asked by the SPA and by the forces for a declaration.
Hussam, let me just remind everybody who's watching this, the SPA is the Sudanese Professional Association. It's a collaboration of various different trade unions, and they have been protesting about your former president, Omar Bashir, about having him stand down. So you got that victory, and now we are where we are right now. Malika, where do you want to take us?
Well, Hussam mentioned the civil disobedience being a tool. So I wanted to share this tweet from our community. Red Roses and Inhabitable Earth says, the military escalated this conflict with killings. Mass civil disobedience demonstrates the Sudanese people's opposition while maintaining the moral high ground. Civil disobedience puts economic and social pressure on the military. They are the people's sanctions, if you will. So keeping in mind, Ahmed, that these are the people's sanctions in this person's view. What does that mean, though, for headlines like this that we just saw right before this show aired? Sudan army and protesters to resume talks on Transitional Council. Do you think that's a good thing? Should the civil disobedience end so that talks can begin?
I'm surprised, as almost everyone, that talks are being proceeded. I, for one, don't understand on what basis the talks are proceeding, because the military council is exactly the same body that attacked us last week. I don't see any guarantees that the talks will bring any good news. So I'm not very optimistic about the talks.
Hiba, you've been reporting in Sudan for a little while. You've just got out. Your reaction to this latest news about the civil disobedience strike being suspended?
Well, it is surprising news. What we did know initially was that the opposition coalition, which is the Declaration of Freedom and Change, were planning to keep up the civil disobedience until the military council hands over power. And even before the civil disobedience started, even before the Monday massacre, in fact, I've been speaking to some activists, and they said that they feel some kind of betrayal from some members of the Declaration of Freedom and Change, just based on the fact that the Declaration of Freedom and Change are negotiating with the military council to begin with. They think that what the coalition should have done was that they should have just immediately just told the military council that they're going to take over power. They're going to form a civilian government. They shouldn't have negotiated with the military junta. And they're saying that negotiations alone, the process of compromising right and left, gave the military council some kind of emboldenment and some kind of legitimacy that they do not deserve. So Ahmed is not the only one. Even before the massacre happened, we've been speaking to the protesters. And so this is likely, this decision to suspend the civil disobedience will likely surprise and disappoint a lot of the supporters of the coalition.
Guess I want to take you back to June the 3rd and some video that, if you're watching and you're rather than listening, this video is very disturbing. It's very violent, but it was taken on June the 3rd by the Sudan Congress Party, and it was the crackdown on the protesters. Have a look.
Hello? Hello?
The shouting that you're hearing is they're killing us. They're killing us. Mohammed, how do you have talks with a military council that is responsible to doing that to protesters?
Actually, I don't think with the military council is a good idea now. I don't think there will be any good progress with the military council. Those people are responsible of killing the peaceful protesters, and they refuse to admit their responsibility. Kabashi, the spokesperson of the military council appears yesterday to try to monopolize the media outlet and try to share responsibility with the freedom and change forces. And surprisingly, as Ahmed said, now the freedom and change wants to reform the military council again.
So I want to share this tweet from Josh Lambert, who says our research, and he links to it here in this tweet, suggests that when regimes feel threatened, they often use violence to repress civilians in the capital. The post-coup Sudan regime is still feeling threatened. Even when non-violent, look for protests to be dealt with harshly. And so, of course, he's directing us to the violence that we just saw that left scores dead. Hussam, your point of view, what do you make of this idea that this regime is feeling threatened and that is why they acted out?
For me, this regime is a continuation of Omar al-Bashir's regime. No one from the opposition now, from the SPA or the FDFC, has any doubts about this, or at least they are unified in understanding that the leaders that took over power from Omar al-Bashir were not part and parcel from the revolutionary forces that took out to the streets since December 2019. So their decision to remove Omar al-Bashir was probably a decision to find a way to remove the head of the regime while preserving the regime intact as it is and preserving their own interests. So they still see the demonstrations and the protesters as a direct threat to them. The fact that they have dealt with such violence, first of all, let's be clear that this is, we're seeing it on cameras and we're seeing it in Khartoum, but this is nothing short of what the regime has been doing since they took power in 1989.
We need to remember the coalition.
Yes, Ahmed, go ahead.
The coalition forces. Yeah, the coalition forces, we always need to remember that it's consisted of many different political parties. Some of them are reactionary in nature. Some of them have been very compromising even before the protests, before December. They have been very compromising in the way they dealt with the regime. All these bodies are now considered part of the opposition. I believe, and many believe, that they are responsible for the stalling of the revolutionary action. Their media statements have been against that civil disobedience. They have been against any kind of escalation in the non-violent struggle. I think what the DFC needs to do now is to admit that some of its elements are truly against the revolution, just as much as UAE and Saudi Arabia are against the revolution. And we need to start from there. I think this is really where we need to be talking right now, because any talks with the military council, the way it is now, is just counter-revolutionary.
Ahmed, what do you...
What Ahmed is saying, basically, if I may interrupt.
Yeah, please go ahead, Hiba.
What Ahmed is saying is that he wants the Declaration of Freedom and Change Coalition to go back to the drawing board, to the negotiating table, and regroup and take some elements out. But that, in my point of view, is not going to help right now. I think they need to come together on both sides. While we were covering on the ground, we've seen the divisions, and most of all, we've seen how the military council seems to be actively trying to divide between the different parties, having different meetings with them. So they were taking advantage of the fact that each and every political party in that coalition wanted certain gains out of this revolution, and they were playing that. And they were dividing, but that has been the policy of the former regime under Bashir, which is divide and rule, to make sure that they remain the powerful one, and that the negotiating
but actually, I don't think the military council isn't doing. They don't have to do a lot of work to divide. The coalition is already really divided. When you look at the statements coming from al-Sadiq al-Mahdi or other, I think this is the point where the DFC, the coalition, needs to not go back to the drawing board, but just re-estimates their power. The streets are really standing strong behind them. It's just a matter of admitting that power and cut all ties with the military council. There is absolutely no good will come from talks with the military council right now. And all this talk about the elections and within the DFC, it's supported by certain elements that needs to be shed out.
Hassam, go ahead.
Yeah, let me just say that while I agree with what Hiba just said, that the regime, the Transitional Military Council had one of two strategies, and I think they deployed both to crush this revolution. One is to kill as many people as possible, and they continued doing this after the fall of Omar al-Bashir. They continued killing one after another. There was a massacre on the 8th of Ramadan, and then there were a few cases of individuals being killed, and then the massacre of the 3rd of June, the 29th day of Ramadan. They continued doing this. The other tactic that they could have is to divide the opposition, and they tried to do this. The DFC forces have been they tried their best to keep the unity, and they understand that this is crucial in taking this revolution to what the Sudanese people want, to fulfill their Sudanese people aspirations. I understand that there are very wide differences and different views within the DFC forces, But let's admit that where we are now, and the call to end the civil disobedience today, or to suspend the civil disobedience today, comes as a result of the Ethiopian Prime Minister, Mr. Abiy Ahmed's intervention in the Sudanese problem. Mr. Abiy Ahmed,
in a time where Janjaweed RSF forces are filling the streets. I'm sorry to interrupt, but right now they lifted the civil disobedience, yes, but we need to remember that there is RSF combatants in the streets, armed, are firing at people. We cannot organize freely. The internet is cut completely, and the Sudanese national TV has been spreading lies and rumors and basically controlling the narrative. All of this is happening right now. Abiy Ahmed did not help with that. I wonder what he helped with. He helped in convincing the DFC to lift the civil disobedience. What does that benefit? It benefits only the TMC. It does not benefit us.
All right.
We still cannot communicate. We still cannot organize.
All right, so just take a pause, everybody, because I want to get Malika back into the conversation. She's monitoring what's going on online. Malika, go ahead.
Hiba, I heard you trying to get in there, so I'll give this one to you because we got a tweet from someone who's watching live. This is Jason, and he says, I'm seeing a fiery discussion on ajstream between reps of DFCF and Sudan Change Now on the way forward. The revolution is deeply divided between youth in the streets and opposition leaders in the negotiating room on strategy and tactics. Of course, you were just in Sudan, you are out now, but when you look at it from this vantage point, does this look like a division that you're seeing and that you think we might continue to see?
Well, yes, indeed. Just like Ahmed said earlier, and just like I said, there has always been divisions between the different groups that are involved in this revolution. And the fact that not only people outside, but the military council is able to pick up on that's their vantage point right now. You know, they're trying to make sure that all these differences between the two sides, whether it's the age difference, whether it's the ideology beliefs, whether it's how to move on forward with the revolution and the party beliefs, these divisions have always been there, Malika. But what's significant now is that it's coming out more in the open. In the past, before Bashir's ousting, they would hold their own meetings. They were able to keep it undercover until after Bashir was ousted. And that's when everything came out. And that's what the military council is playing on right now. But regardless of the difference between all sides, you know, right now, as a coalition, they're much weaker than when they really started. You know, back in the days when the protest started in December, nobody knew most of the members of the Sudanese Professionals Association. When they formed their coalition, it was known that there was a Sudanese Professional Association, which is leading the calls in the organization for the protest, and there were the other political parties. Most of them have come back to Sudan after Bashir was ousted, and the SPA figures are now known. The activists who have always supported the change and the call for change are now known. So now they've lost their main card, which were the protesters in front of the army headquarters, and they've been divided. You know, and they can't even organize the same level of street protest that they were able to in December, because, like Ahmed said, the rapid support forces are on the street, and they have orders to shoot to kill. It's not about arresting people and negotiating with them or interrogating with them. It's now just orders to shoot to kill.
Do you know, Hiba,
much weaker.
What this is sounding like, Hiba, is that some part of the opposition is having a conversation with the Transitional Military Council. There are other protesters who are saying we are not giving up our power being civil disobedience. So this sounds extremely chaotic, even though people aren't necessarily out on the streets because they have very serious safety concerns. I just want to look back at these last 2 months, because it's been an extraordinary 2 months, and the highs and the lows in terms of what Sudanese people have been able to achieve. It's been like a roller coaster. Let's look at this timeline, starting on April the 12th. And that was the day after President Omar al-Bashir was ousted. And then we go on to May the 15th. We're just picking out some milestone dates for you. This is when the Military Council and the opposition agree on a 3-year transition period to an all-civilian government. Still very positive, still a lot of optimism. And then June the 3rd, do you remember that video I showed you just a few minutes ago where civilians were attacked and shot at? That video with a gentleman running through the streets saying they're killing us. That was just June the 3rd. June the 4th, the very next day, the Military Council cancels the agreement with the protesters. And then we had the civil disobedience, 2 days of a general strike. And then here we are, June the 11th, where that civil disobedience has been suspended for now. Hiba, I'm just wondering about the international perspective and the forces that are either in the background or the foreground that we should be thinking about right now. What influence are they having on the Transitional Military Council, Hiba?
They're pretty much running the whole show, Femi, and it's not a hidden fact. And the Military Council doesn't even bother to show that's not the case. Let's remember that when the Military Council came, they said that they were going to not lead the government. They said that they had no intention to lead, but that what they wanted to do was make sure that a government is formed and they will be focusing on safety and security. And the first thing that happened in terms of recognizing the Military Council was that Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates came out and said that we support this council and we're going to give it $3 billion in aid. And then we started seeing, like Ahmed said, some members of the coalition meeting with having meetings in the United Arab Emirates and meeting the Saudi Arabian ambassador in Sudan. Then we started seeing the head of the Military Council and his deputy having trips. And you can.
I think, Hiba, we are at a point of this revolution that we really need to consider being extra radical. Maybe I can say a few minutes ago, the fact that an agreement for a 3 years transitional government was reached. It was presented as it's a positive thing, but we need to remember that it was actually a compromise because what we signed, the DFC, the declaration
Ahmed,
in January,
can I say
consisted
this?
of 4 years. We agreed this was a compromise. I think we need to get more radical in things like demanding the removal of the UAE embassy and the Saudi embassy for their involvement in the massacre. They were heavily involved. The cars that were used to kill us came from Saudi Arabia. The heavy pickup trucks used by RSF militias are made in UAE. We need to start addressing these things.
Let me, Ahmed. Sorry to interrupt you, but let me just say two final points. First of all, I think this revolution will not end regardless of the outcome of the negotiations if they continue. We've seen in the past couple of months that these negotiations are not going in a straight line. So. And even if the forces, the political parties reach an agreement, the number of youth that took to the streets in the past 6 months are a power that everyone has to take seriously, and they can continue playing this role regardless of the government that will be the outcome of the next couple of weeks or months. So the revolution will not end. People have realized their powers, and they should demand and continue to demand for what their aspirations. The second point, and at the end of this show, I think we should mention that there is a total blackout in internet in Sudan. This is very serious. The Transitional Military Council forcefully demanded the mobile operators to shut down the internet. And we've seen in the history of the government of al-Bashir that this always collided with atrocities and massacres. This has been, in the past, it was regional. When there is an attack in a village or somewhere in Darfur, the security authority officers would shut down partially GSM stations, mobile stations. But in December 2018, at the beginning of the revolution, they partially shut the social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp. But in June the 3rd, they shut it
Hussam, we hear you. We hear you. This conversation is not over. Really, there's so much more. Even every moment of every day, as Sudan protesters are struggling, as the Transitional Military Council are trying to work out where do they go next. I highly recommend that you do this. Stay on social, because activists and protesters are trying to get the news out that way. Follow Hiba Morgan, of course. And then look here at aljazeera.com. We have Sudan crackdown or the latest. So keep following Al Jazeera and we will do our best to keep telling the story about Sudan right now. Thank you very much, guests, for being with us. We'll see you next time.